All right, so welcome to week 4, and this week we're going to be talking a lot about nutrition, and I just want to say thank you to everybody that's stuck with the class so far. So mom, dad, thank you. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of these lectures. And this week with nutrition, going to try to bring some energy because nutrition could be a really dry topic, and I'm going to try to make it as applicable as possible while slipping in some of the science with it. And nutrition is such an important component of taking care of your animal. So we'll definitely, go over that and what's important to remember as a horse owner. So today, for this lecture right now, we're just going to kind of talk some basic anatomy of the horse digestive system. And I think that will help you understand, how they digest these nutrients and why we feed them what we do. So horses are non-ruminant herbivores. So herbivores eat plants, plant material, and that's what we feed them. Now, a ruminant is what we call cows and sheep and other livestock species like that, where they actually have the stomach, and in cows, they actually have 4 chambers to their stomach, and that's where they ruminate and they break down the plant material. Well, horses and pigs and rhinoceroses and tapirs that are very similar to the relatives of the horse, they are what we call monogastric, so they have 1 stomach instead of 4 like the cow. And this plant material that goes through their stomach into the small intestine, then to the hindgut, that's where it's fermented and that's where it's broken down. So all the stalks and parts of the leaves that don't get broken down in the small intestine actually get broken down in the hindgut. So we'll talk a little bit about the anatomy and how that happens. Now, if you look at the entire digestive system in the horse, you can see it takes up a lot of space in the body. I mean, similar to us too. This is all digestive system, most of it. With we do have the lungs, which you see there in that picture, but then you have all of this digestive tract that's in there. So it's very large in the horse. Now, when we talk digestion, we always start with the mouth, and then we'll carry it all the way through the digestive tract. So that's really where your digestion starts in the mouth with mastication. And horses, when they chew, they don't chew up and down like we do. They actually chew side to side to break down these long stem forages. Remember, this is what nature intended for them to eat, was to eat the grasses and the other forages on the ground. So they produce a lot of saliva, over 10 gallons per day. And of course that's going to vary on the forage. If it's really green leafy forage that's in the spring, it's got more moisture content. So maybe don't have to produce as much saliva as something like really dry hay, or during the drier months when they're eating grasses that are pretty dry, they'll produce some more saliva, and that's important. It starts with digestion. They've got some enzymes in there and bicarbonate, which buffers the stomach, because remember, all of us know, our stomachs can get a little acidic, so that's what saliva helps with. Now, I thought it was worthwhile to talk about the teeth of the horse here, and how we use this to age an animal, which we're going to get into. Now, in the horse, they can vary anywhere from 36 to 44 teeth. Now, 36 teeth are usually with mares, 44 are usually with stallions. And the reason that is 2 sets of teeth. We call them wolf teeth and canine teeth. Now, typically, you only see those in the males. So a stallion or a gelding are going to get these, but sometimes you can see them in mares. They'll actually get some of these teeth erupting. Now, what's also interesting about this is horses do get baby teeth like us, and they only get 24, and then by the time they're 5, they should have all their adult teeth. Now, in this table here, this is just showing you the different times when the baby teeth, so the deciduous teeth, actually come in, when you can expect it. So when they're born, right away you can see they have those front incisors with those young foals, and then by 2.5 years, their permanent incisors should be in. Now, by the time a horse is 5, so if we look here, that's when they should have all of their teeth. All of their permanent teeth should be in by then, okay? Now, we talked a little bit about aging, so there's different ways to do it, and I'm just going to keep it brief for this lecture and talk about 2 main ways you can look and open up a horse's mouth and look at their teeth. And the first is the angle of the upper and lower incisors. So you can see the angle here with these really young horses. actually that angle is not quite 90 degrees, but you know, almost there. It's pretty linear. Now, as they get older, you can see this older horse where you really get a sharp angle. And so those teeth really start to protrude out and down. Okay, and then the other way to tell an age, and this one's the easiest, I think, is Galvani's groove, which here in this picture, you can see it really, really clearly, where they start to get this growth down their corner incisor. It's really just I almost say it's a discoloration of the tooth. And it starts to appear about the age of 10, and then it starts to grow down the tooth. So if we looked at these images here, around age 10, that's where it first shows up. Now, by the time they're 15, that should be almost halfway down the tooth. So you can see that. And so if you look at this image here on a real horse, you can see that that's a little bit past the halfway mark. So this horse is probably 15 or greater. Now, as they get older, towards 20, it almost hits the bottom of the tooth. And then we see around 25 to 30, it starts to recede down. So there's still a little remnant of Galvani's groove on a 30-year-old horse, and you know, as it recedes down the tooth. And if you open up the mouth of a horse and you don't see Galvani's groove, but you see this huge, incisive angle, you know that's a pretty old horse. So those are the two ways that are most common to age a horse by teeth. So moving down from the mouth, the feed is carried down by the esophagus. It takes this food bolus mixed with saliva, carries it down, which is pretty long, 4.5 feet, into the stomach. Now the stomach is really small in the horse compared to the rest of the digestive tract. It actually is only made up about 10%. And again, when we talk about, we talked a little bit about behavior last week. In horses and donkeys and mules and all these other equids, even zebras today, are meant to eat small meals all day. So they go and eat little meals, and so the food carried in the stomach, it doesn't need to be large. It's where cattle or some of these ruminants, they go and eat large meals, and then they go and sit under a tree, and they'll chew their cud, re-swallow it, regurgitate it, chew some more, mix it with the bacteria in its stomach to digest that long forage. That is not true with the equids. They eat this forage, it gets in the stomach, gets mixed a little bit, and then gets passed on pretty quickly. So we can actually see that the feed actually passes within like 15 minutes or less. It can be out of there. Now, what's also interesting about horses is horses cannot vomit like cows can, or even our dogs and cats and other pets, because they have a really tight sphincter between the esophagus and the stomach. So that prevents them from vomiting. And like I said, that feed is in there, 15 minutes roughly, gets mixed, and then gets passed on to the small intestine. Now, the small intestine is really long, 70 feet or 21 meters. So, if you look at a 7-story building and took it from the bottom all the way up to the top, that's about how long the small intestine is in the horse. And this is really important because this is the major site of digestion and absorption. So this is where a lot of the horse gets its nutrients. Things such as protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, all of these get broken down and absorbed in the small intestine. Now, really, and it sticks with the plant material. The plant material that is not broken down or digested in the small intestine gets passed into the cecum. So the cecum is kind of a large vat, getting into this hind gut. And you can see it's very similar to the stomach of a cow or the rumen of a cow. This is where that forage is getting mixed with the bacteria that breaks down, or the microbes that break down the plant material. And then it gets some more nutrients in its diet from there. Now, I will say here too, this is, we talked about laminitis. When a horse or a donkey or other equid goes and eats a lot of grain, so they go and just eat grain as much as they can, and that large meal gets in their stomach and is passed on to the small intestine. Well, a lot of that grain doesn't get digested in the small intestine, so they empty into this cecum. And this is where those microbes just go crazy. That's what we talked about in laminitis. So that's why we see that happening. Now, normally, when we feed a grain, either 5 pounds or less per meal, that grain will most of it will get digested in the small intestine, and we're not worried about it. It's just these horses that get into the feed bag and eat themselves. Now, going on from the cecum, we go into the large colon, and this is huge, where you can see 20 gallons or 75 liters. And so this is where those microbes, broken down those nutrients, gets passed on to the large colon, and these are where those are absorbed. Now, I also put this in here because a talk later in the week is going to be on colic, and this is where we see a lot of impaction because of the twists and turns. Again, we're feeding these horses and donkeys, twice a day, maybe 3 times a day. So they get these large meals. They get large, a meal of hay, and then that gets passed on in the digestive tract. So what happens is when you get to this large colon, that large meal can get stuck at these pelvic flexures where it gets in and just can't turn, and this is where, and then it gets all backed up, and so this is where we see a lot of impaction colic in the equids. Now, after the large colon, the small colon and rectum, again, a little bit smaller in the digestive tract, and this is where a lot of the water is absorbed from the diet. So all of that plant material that had a lot of moisture, that's where it's absorbed, and this is where it forms those fecal balls that we see with horses. Now, during the spring, anybody that owns any of these animals knows, during the spring when the forage is really rich in moisture and really green, the small colon probably can't absorb all that water, so their feces is a little bit more watery than, say, late summer or in the winter when they're eating more dry forage. So that kind of covers the digestive system, and in the next lecture we're going to jump into talking about body condition, how to weigh your horse if you don't have a livestock scale, stuff like that. So I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture.